Thank you. It's wonderful to be back here. A few years ago, this guy in London loses his cat. It's an outdoor cat, but it normally comes back in the evening, and one day it doesn't come back. So he looks around for it, can't find it, gives up. The next morning, he goes to take out the garbage, and he opens up the garbage bin, and there's the cat. So he wonders, how did the cat get inside the bin? Now, it turns out that there's cameras all over London, and one of the cameras is pointed to the front of his apartment. So he gets hold of the video, and this is what he sees. Oops. So he puts the video on Facebook and asks, does anybody know who this woman is? And she's identified, and pretty soon the newspapers get hold of the story. Now, it's not that surprising that the man would be angry at what happened. It's not that surprising that the cat would be angry. But people all over England were furious. And this woman ultimately got death threats and had to be put under police protection. And as a psychologist, I'm interested in this. Why do we get so angry at things that don't affect us? This anger is a theme throughout history and literature. It's a common theme of movies, like the Clint Eastwood revenge movies, and certainly a common theme in television. Now, you might be tempted to think that this anger is a glitch in the system, an accident, something irrational. But many evolutionary biologists see this anger as forming an adaptive function that is absolutely critical for the creation of large-scale cooperative and kind societies. And in a classic experiment, Fair and Gachter explored this by having people play a public goods game. Now, a public goods game is a game where everybody puts in money, the money gets multiplied, and then it goes back to people. And the best result for everybody is if everybody contributes. But the best result for an individual is if the individual holds back and takes the benefit without paying any of the costs. And this is analogous to things like cleaning up after a party, or volunteering for the military, or doing shared childcare. So when they do this game, they found that people start off nice, but then they get meaner and meaner and meaner. They start to say, I'm not going to put in money, I'm just going to take the money. But then they added a clever twist, and this twist was they gave people a chance to punish, to pay their own money to punish people who didn't put in money. And they found a few interesting things. One thing is people did punish. A second thing is they got angry as they punished. And a third, most important thing is punishment made people behave better. Now, from this view, anger isn't a glitch. Anger is an adaptation that makes us into better people. Now, if anger is an adaptation, you should expect it to be innate, to be hardwired, to show up in babies and young children. And in collaboration with Karen Wynn and Kylie Hamlin at Yale, I've been exploring the moral lives of babies and using different studies to look at babies' moral reactions to things. So our typical study involves showing babies basically a one-act play where characters interact. So here's one of our examples. A character is trying to get up a hill, and another one knocks it down. In another situation, the character is trying to get up the hill, and another character helps it. And we could study babies' reactions in different ways, but one way we do it is we just see, who do babies reach for? Who do they choose? And what we found across several studies is as young as 6 months of age, babies go for the good guy. And this happens in a range of different scenarios that they see. But what about reward and punishment? Well, with older toddlers, we tested them where they see the good guy, bad guy situation, and now instead of choosing a character, they get to reward a character or punish a character. And it turns out that when they're asked to reward, to give a treat, they give a treat to the good guy and not the bad guy. But when they're asked to punish, take away something, they overwhelmingly punish the bad guy. We've done other studies with younger babies, with 9-month-olds, that find that babies like characters who are good to good guys, which makes sense. But they also really like characters who are bad to bad guys, who punish bad guys, suggesting that before their first birthday, they have some sort of rudimentary sense of justice. Now, I've talked about anger and argued that it plays a powerful role. I want to turn now for a bit and talk about empathy. So I've always been interested in empathy. Empathy is usually viewed as putting yourself in the shoes of another person, feeling what they feel. It's my favorite example. And a lot of philosophers and psychologists talk about the benefits of empathy, how empathy motivates us to be better people. And I don't doubt that it does have these benefits. But at the same time, empathy suffers from some terrible limitations. One limitation is it tends to be very biased and parochial and often racist. This cartoon illustrates the Western reaction to Ebola, pointing out that there was tremendous empathy and concern about the white victims and almost none about the black victims. Another factor, limitation of empathy, is that sometimes it takes anger and multiplies it, making it irrational. So consider the terrible atrocities that we see around the world, like the lynchings of African Americans in the United States, or the genocides of Europe. People often talk about these atrocities and say they're due to hatred and racism and dehumanization, and I don't doubt that that's true. But they're also inevitably due to empathy. When these atrocities are motivated, are sparked, the people who do so will get other people to feel the suffering of innocent victims. The people who motivated lynchings told these breathtaking stories about white women victimized by cruel blacks. The Germans who drove the Holocaust told people about the stories of these horrible Jews molesting and killing children. Our empathy for these victims catalyzes our anger and often leads to the most horrible of consequences. None of this is ancient history. Any modern democratic society that seeks to generate support for a war will do so by motivating empathy for the victims. Last year, when there was talk about the bombing of Syria, and the newspapers were filled with stories of the victims of chemical warfare. Now, as we prepare for a battle with ISIS, images like this will not stay off of our screens. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that these wars and aggressive acts are irrational or immoral, but I think empathy tilts the balance in the wrong way. I think empathy makes us care too much for an immediate victim and not enough for the unimaginable multitudes who might be killed in an upcoming war. So I think the situation is rather surprising. People normally think of anger as corrosive and evil and something to get rid of. But I think there's a lot of evidence that anger is actually one of the things that keeps us together as a society, that allows us to form cooperative bonds and work together and be in places like this. People often think about empathy as an unadulterated good, something you can't have too much of. But I think that's mistaken as well. I think empathy can be biased, can be racist, and can motivate some of the most terrible acts that humans are capable of. Again, this may be surprising and it may be uncomfortable, but I think these facts are worth knowing if we want to properly change the world. Thank you.